I work with some international clients and people who come in who are afraid of speaking. And one of the most common things that they bring up is my accent. English isn't my first language. I'm afraid that people won't understand me. Was an accent an issue for you, or how about this? If people come up to you and goes, "I'm afraid I have an accent. What can I do?" Well, how would you answer that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think our world has changed an awful lot since I grew up, and I think we live in a world that is a lot more accepting in a lot of ways as far as differences go. I think what people look for and what people really appreciate is what comes from the heart. I don't think the accent. Yeah, if you're a broadcaster and you're reading the news, of course you want to be clear, but whether that's because you have an accent or because there's a speech impediment, if you're working through some things and you're clear, I don't think that's an issue. But I think that people oftentimes are pretty hard on themselves and pretty critical about things like accents. And I do hear that. I do hear that from entrepreneurs that come to us and say, "Hey, I want to sound like I don't have an accent." And I think sometimes that's a mistake. I think sometimes that's part of the charm in being a communicator is being different from everybody else. But I think that if your message is solid, will take more of an interest in what your message is rather than how you deliver it in terms of things like accents.
Mhm. Totally agree. I got one of my examples with my clients is like I know a lot of engineers who are very passionate, very confident about what they do, but their accent is so heavy that really you can't understand some of the stuff that they say. But man, are they confident? They will tell you until there's no tomorrow, but they're confident. So the confidence does not relate to the accent. It's really your message and how sure you are about the stuff that you have to say. Now, the second thing that most people bring up is I'm afraid to speak in front of people. I'm afraid to be on camera. I'm afraid to stand up in front of an audience. How do you face that fear? For you at a very young age, you're okay with standing up in front of people and talking. There's some nerves there. So how did you overcome those nerves?
Well, maybe do it a few thousand times, and you won't. It's like anything, right? It's like any kind of skill that you would have in a job or a career. The more times you do it, and you can do it in your sleep. I mean, I still get nervous at times for big events that I'm doing, especially live announcing. That's can be a very nerve-wracking thing. But uh, as I said to somebody a couple of weeks ago, when you're announcing, you zone out. When you're speaking, you zone out. You probably know this. When you're extremely focused, really you don't notice anything on the side. And it's like I guess if you were, I would liken it to being like a surgeon. Man, I could not imagine being a surgeon with somebody's life in their hands and they're under the knife with you. But surgeons, they will have done that so many times that they're not nervous. So I would say that practice, whether it's speaking in front of the mirror or just knowing your content and being confident about what you're speaking of, then nothing else matters, right? When I joke about having done it a few thousand times, I would probably say probably close to 1,000 times I've emceed or hosted something, whether it was through professional associations or just, these days, if you're on Zoom or you're on Teams, I mean, what better practice is there to be in front of the camera speaking with people, right? And you don't get nervous when you're in front of the Zoom. So why would you be nervous in front of a crowd? And it all becomes, I'm afraid that they're judging me. That's why I'm nervous. I'm gonna screw up. Again, if you know your material, you know your content, you're fine.
Mhm. Something else that lots of people are afraid of is screwing up live in front of people. I'm sure for somebody who's been doing this for so many years, there may be some instances that did not go your way. Is there something that you could share where, man, I really butchered that segment, or I did that completely wrong? And then how did you mitigate that and fix that situation up?
Well, okay, so my favorite one that I still get bugged about was when I first started doing horse racing announcing. There was a horse named Ginger Beer, and when you're memorizing names, you've got to memorize maybe 60, 70, 80 names of horses and associated numbers and the way they look. It gets a little confusing at times. And in my first season of announcing, I ended up calling this horse Ginger Beef the whole time for the whole season. And it was probably because I was really hungry at the time I was doing it. And the funny thing is that the owner is a friend of mine, and so he we would joke about it, and we still joke about it to this day with some other people. But if I could write a book, it would be about things that I've made mistakes doing. And I don't think that, if you're afraid to fail, you're missing the point, because it's from those experiences that we learn, right? And so never be afraid to make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time with things, whether it's announcing or good grief, not being able to remember somebody's name, because I do talk to a few hundred people a week. So it's what helps us develop. And as far as failure or making mistakes, I think we should embrace those opportunities, because again, I think that's where we learn from them.
You mean the owner didn't even call you out on it? Let you do it for a whole year? A whole season of calling the wrong name? Come on.